Welcome everybody, I'm Brian Walsh, and in today's lesson we're going over, we're going to touch on some stoichiometry. So specifically, we're going to be looking at how to convert between grams and moles of the same substance.
Anytime we want to convert a substance from grams to moles, or from moles to grams, we're going to use the substance's molar mass. For example, if they ask us how many moles of iron are in 111.7 grams of iron, that means we're going to be converting from grams of iron to moles of iron, which means we need to know the molar mass of iron. And if we look at the periodic table, we see that the molar mass of iron is 55.845 grams per mole. So if we wanted to write that in fraction form, we could write it like this: 55.845 grams of iron per 1 mole of iron. So let's convert our 111.7 grams of iron to moles of iron. We start with our 111.7 grams of iron, and I put it over 1 so it's easier to see our units cancel. And remember that anytime we set up our calculations, the most important thing to remember is to set it up so that your units cancel. So we might be tempted to multiply our 111.7 grams of iron by our molar mass. But if we did that, we can see that we would be multiplying grams of iron times grams of iron divided by moles of iron. What we get for our final answer if we do that is grams squared per mole, which is not what we're looking for. We're looking for moles of iron, not grams squared per mole of iron, which tells us that we need to flip our conversion factor. If we set the problem up this way, you can see that we have grams on bottom and grams on top, which means that those units are going to cancel. So we cancel grams on top with grams on bottom, and that leaves us with moles of iron. And because moles of iron are what we're trying to find, we can go ahead and do this calculation now. So we multiply 111.7 times 1 and divide by 55.845, and what we get is 2 moles of iron. And I went ahead and rounded this to 4 significant figures because they gave us 4 sig figs in the problem. So now we know how to convert between grams and moles of a substance, but what if we want to convert between atoms or molecules and moles? In that case, we're going to use Avogadro's number, which in case you don't remember is 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd. So let's take a look at an example to see how we're going to do this. This question says, how many moles of iron are in 1.5 times 10 to the 24th atoms of iron? So we can see we're going to be converting from atoms of iron to moles of iron, which means we're going to be using Avogadro's number. So we're going to start our calculation with 1.5 times 10 to the 24th atoms of iron. And again, we put this over 1 just to illustrate how our units cancel. Now before we get to this next step, remember that Avogadro's number is actually a conversion factor. What it tells us is that there are 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd atoms of iron per 1 mole of iron. But before we plug this into our calculation, we need to make sure that our units are in the right place. So if we were to just multiply our original 1.5 times 10 to the 24 atoms of iron by this conversion factor, we can see that we'd be multiplying atoms of iron times atoms of iron divided by moles of iron, which doesn't cancel our units. Which means that once again we need to flip our conversion factor before we calculate. So we still have 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd atoms of iron per 1 mole of iron, but we flipped our equation and now atoms are on bottom, and now these atoms on bottom can cancel with these atoms on top. So these atoms cancel with these atoms, and we're left with moles of iron. And because moles of iron is what we're looking for, we can do this calculation now. So we multiply 1.5 times 10 to the 24th times 1 divided by 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd. And what we get is 2.5 moles of iron. And this time I rounded it to 2 sig figs because we only have 2 sig figs given. So we learned how to convert between grams and moles by using the molar mass, and we learned how to convert between atoms or molecules and moles by using Avogadro's number. Now let's look at how we can convert between grams and atoms or molecules. So this problem asks us how many grams of iron are in 8.3 times 10 to the 23rd atoms of iron. So we've been given atoms of iron, which means we're starting here, and we're asked for grams of iron, which means we're here. So we're going from here to here. And as you can see, there's no straight path between these two. If we want to go from atoms, in this case atoms, if we want to go from atoms to grams, we first have to go from atoms to moles, then we can go from moles to grams. So we start with our given value over 1, And we're going to use Avogadro's number to convert from atoms to moles. So we set up our conversion factor so we have atoms on bottom so they can cancel with the atoms on top. So these atoms cancel with these atoms, and now we have moles of iron. So at this point, we're right here. So we still have one more step because we need to go from moles to grams, which means we need the molar mass. So we look at our periodic table, and we see that the molar mass of iron is 55.845 grams per mole. So we set up our conversion factor so we have moles on bottom so they can cancel with our moles on top. So moles cancel with moles, and now we're left with grams of iron. And because grams of iron are what we're trying to find, we can go ahead and do this calculation now. We multiply 8.3 times 10 to the 23rd times 1 times 55.845 divided by 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd. And what we get is 77 grams of iron. And again, we use 2 sig figs because that's what we were given. So you can see we started with atoms here, which is this step. Then we converted those atoms to moles using Avogadro's number, which is this step. Then we converted moles to grams using the molar mass, which is this step.
If you have any questions about anything, or if you have any feedback that you'd like to give me, please leave me a message. You can leave a comment, or you can email me at chemistrymadeeasy118@gmail.com. Thanks for watching.